The stadium fell silent. 40,000 humans sat frozen in their seats as the massive alien ship cast its shadow over New York City. The air itself seemed to vibrate with otherworldly energy, making everyone's teeth ache and their hearts race. Marcus. Chen wiped sweat from his palms as he stared up at the impossible sight. The ship was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Its surface rippled like liquid mercury, constantly shifting between shapes that hurt to look at directly. Strange symbols pulsed along its hull in colors that didn't have names. "This can't be real," whispered Sarah, his co-worker, clutching his arm. They had been at the baseball game when the ships appeared worldwide. Every major city on Earth now had one hovering above it. A beam of light descended from the ship's center, and Marcus felt his stomach drop. The light was searching, moving slowly across the crowd like a spotlight at a concert. But this wasn't entertainment. Everyone knew what was happening. The aliens had made their demands clear through every television, radio, and internet connection on the planet. They wanted champions, one human from each major population center. The purpose remained a mystery, but the message was crystal clear: comply or face extinction. The light swept closer to Marcus's section. He could see people panicking, some trying to hide under their seats, others standing tall with false bravery. A few rows ahead, a man in a military uniform straightened his shoulders and saluted the approaching beam. Then the light stopped. It hovered over Marcus like a physical weight, warm and tingling against his skin. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Every eye in the stadium turned toward him, and he felt smaller than an ant under a magnifying glass. The air above the stadium shimmered, and a figure materialized in the beam of light. She was clearly not human, but her beauty was undeniable. Her skin had a subtle blue-green tint that seemed to shift with her emotions, and her eyes were larger than any human's, filled with swirling galaxies of silver and gold. She wore what looked like armor made of starlight itself, flowing and solid at the same time. The alien princess floated 20 feet above the crowd, her gaze sweeping across the terrified faces below. When her eyes found Marcus, time seemed to stop. She studied him with an intensity that made him feel like she was reading his soul. Then she raised one elegant hand, her finger pointing directly at him, and spoke in a voice that somehow reached every person in the stadium without being loud. "I choose this human." Marcus felt the world tilt. The beam of light wrapped around him like gentle hands, and he began to rise from his seat. Sarah screamed his name, reaching for him, but her fingers passed through empty air. Other people in the crowd shouted protests, demands, questions. The military officer who had been saluting now looked relieved and guilty at the same time. As Marcus rose higher, he could see the entire city spread out below. Other beams of light were lifting people from different locations. A woman in a business suit from a skyscraper downtown, a teenager from a school playground in Brooklyn, an elderly man from a park bench in Queens. The princess floated closer, to him, and he could see that her expression wasn't cruel or commanding. Instead, she looked curious, maybe even concerned. "Do not fear," she said, and her voice seemed to come from inside his head. "You have been chosen for something greater than you can imagine." "Chosen for what?" Marcus managed to ask, though speaking while floating 50 feet in the air felt surreal. The princess smiled, and it was both beautiful and terrifying. "To save both our worlds." Before he could ask what she meant, the light intensified, and everything went white. Chapter 2. The ship of wonders. Marcus woke up on what felt like a bed made of clouds. The surface beneath him was soft but supportive, adjusting to his body's shape like it was alive. He sat up slowly, his head spinning from the transition. The room around him defied physics. The walls curved in impossible ways, seeming to extend infinitely in some directions while folding back on themselves in others. Colors that had no names on Earth painted the surfaces in patterns that shifted when he wasn't looking directly at them. "The neural adaptation process is complete," said a voice behind him. Marcus spun around to find the alien princess standing near what might have been a door. though it looked more like a waterfall of light. Up close, she was even more striking. Her movements had a fluid grace that made him think of dancers and predators at the same time. "Where am I?" Marcus asked, standing up on unsteady legs. He was surprised to find he was still wearing his jeans and baseball jersey, though they looked oddly out of place in this cosmic environment. "You are aboard the Convergence, my personal vessel," the princess replied. She gestured around them, with pride. "This ship has traveled between 17 galaxies and witnessed the birth of 3 solar systems. It is older than your species, yet younger than your oldest trees." Marcus tried to process that information and failed. "Okay, but why am I here? You said something about saving both our worlds." The princess moved closer, and Marcus caught a scent like ozone and flowers that didn't exist on Earth. "My name is Zara Velthane, Crown Princess of the Dominion of Light. Your name is Marcus Chen, age 28, software engineer, resident of apartment 4B at 247 West 42nd Street. How do you know all that?" "We have been studying your species for some time," Zara said. "Your world is in grave danger, Marcus Chen, as is mine." She waved her hand, and the room around them dissolved. Suddenly they were standing in what looked like the command center of a starship, but one designed by beings who thought in dimensions humans couldn't imagine. Holographic displays showed star maps, energy readings, and images that made Marcus's eyes water. "Behold the Devourers," Zara said, and the central display showed something that made Marcus's blood run cold. The image showed space itself being torn apart. Chunks of reality were simply disappearing, leaving behind nothing, not even darkness, but an absence that hurt to look at. Whatever was causing the destruction was invisible, but its effects were undeniable. Entire solar systems were vanishing like they had never existed. "They are beings from between the spaces of reality," Zara explained, her voice tight with fear. "They consume existence itself, leaving behind void. My people have fought them for 1,000 years, but we are losing. They have already devoured the outer systems of our empire." Marcus stared at the horrifying display. "And they're coming here?" "They follow the paths of quantum resonance between inhabited worlds. Your Earth is next in their pattern." Zara turned to face him, and her galaxy eyes were filled with desperate hope. "But there is a way to stop them, a weapon that can seal the tears in reality they create. However, it requires something my people do not possess, which is chaos." Marcus blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" Zara began pacing, her armor flowing around her like liquid metal. "My people are beings of order, Marcus Chen. We think in patterns, act in harmony, live in structure. This is our strength, but also our limitation. The weapon against the Devourers requires controlled chaos, the ability to think in paradoxes, to act without pattern, to embrace contradiction." She stopped and looked at him directly. "Humans are beings of beautiful chaos. You create art from destruction, find hope in despair, love your enemies and fight for strangers. Your minds work in ways that defy logic, and that is exactly what we need." Marcus felt overwhelmed. "So you're telling me that humanity's biggest weakness is actually our secret weapon?" "Not humanity's weakness," Zara corrected. "Humanity's greatest strength. But we cannot simply take this gift from you. It must be freely given, in full understanding of the cost." "What cost?" Zara's expression grew grave. "The human who wields the chaos weapon will be forever changed. They will become something between human and cosmic force, able to exist in multiple realities simultaneously. They will save both worlds but lose their place in either." The weight of what she was saying settled on Marcus like a heavy blanket. "And you chose me for this?" "I chose you because your chaos burns brighter than most," Zara said softly. "In your mind, I see a man who quit a stable corporate job to help build apps for small businesses, who gives half his income to homeless shelters while living in a tiny apartment, who stayed up all night writing code to help disaster victims he would never meet." Marcus felt exposed, like she had peeled back his skin to see his soul. "That's just being decent." "No," Zara said, stepping closer. "That is chaos. Beautiful, unpredictable, illogical chaos that chooses hope over sense, love over logic. That is what will save us all. Before Marcus could respond, alarms began, blaring throughout the ship. The holographic displays flashed red, and Zara's skin shifted to a deeper blue. "They have found us," she whispered. The ship shuddered, and through the transparent walls, Marcus could see space itself beginning to tear some were. Chapter 3. The Battle Between Realities. The convergence twisted through space-time like a leaf in a hurricane. Marcus gripped a railing that felt warm and alive as the ship's defensive systems engaged. Energy barriers shimmered around them, but even he could see they wouldn't hold for long. Through the observation deck's impossible windows, the Devourers revealed themselves. They weren't creatures in any sense Marcus understood. They were absences, wounds in the fabric of existence that moved with terrible purpose. Where they touched reality, stars simply stopped existing, not destroyed, erased from ever having been. "How do we fight something like that?" Marcus shouted over the screaming alarms. Zara was at the command center, her hands dancing over controls that responded to thought as much as touch. "We cannot fight them conventionally. They exist. Between the spaces of reality, we must collapse those spaces." The ship bucked as another wave of void energy washed over them. Marcus felt something fundamental shift in his chest, like gravity briefly forgot which way was down. "The weapon," he said. "Show me how to use it." Zara turned to him, her eyes wide with surprise. "Marcus, you do not understand what you are accepting. The transformation is irreversible. You will no longer be fully human. And if I don't do it, nobody will be human at all." She stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. But first, you must understand what chaos truly means in this context." The command center around them shifted, becoming a spherical chamber filled with floating symbols and equations that hurt to look at. In the center, a crystalline structure materialized, beautiful and wrong at the same time, like a geometric impossibility made real. "This is the paradox engine," Zara explained. "It can rewrite the laws of physics in localized space, but only if guided by a mind that can hold contradictory truths simultaneously. My people think in linear paths. A leads to B, leads to C, but humans think in spirals, loops, and tangents," Marcus finished, understanding beginning to dawn. "We can believe two opposite things at once and somehow make both true." "Exactly. But to use the engine, you must embrace every contradiction within yourself. Every moment of doubt and certainty, love and hate, hope and despair. You must become a living paradox." The ship shuddered again, more violently this time. Through the chamber's walls, Marcus could see parts of the ship's hull simply ceasing to exist as the Devourers pressed their attack. "How long do we have?" he asked. "Minutes," Zara replied. "Perhaps less." Marcus approached the paradox engine. Up close, it was even more beautiful and terrifying. He could see layers of reality folded within its structure, each one containing infinite possibilities. His reflection in its faceted surface showed him as he was, as he could be, and as he never would be, all at the same time. "What do I have to do?" "Place your hands on the resonance nodes," Zara instructed, pointing to two spots on the engine that seemed to shift location every time he looked away. "Then embrace every contradiction that makes you human." Marcus reached out, his fingers hovering over the impossible surface. "Will I still be me?" Zara's expression softened. "You will be more yourself than you ever thought possible, and less, and neither, and both." The answer made no sense, and perfect sense at the same time. Marcus placed his palms on the engine. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Every moment of his life played out simultaneously. Every choice he had made branched into infinite alternatives. He was brave and cowardly, selfish and generous, wise and foolish all at once. The contradictions didn't cancel each other out. They amplified each other, creating something new. Through the chaos of his expanding consciousness, Marcus felt the Devourer's presence like ice in his veins. They were so alien that even seeing them with his enhanced perception caused reality to flinch. But he could understand them now. They weren't evil. They were hungry. They consumed existence because existence was the only thing that could satisfy their nature. "I can see them," Marcus said, his voice echoing from dimensions that didn't exist. "They're not trying to destroy everything. They're trying to return everything to the void they came from. They think existence is wrong somehow." "Can you stop them?" Zara asked, her voice seeming to come from very far away. Marcus felt the engine responding to his chaotic human thoughts. Reality became malleable around him, like clay in cosmic hands. He could feel the tears in space-time where the devourers had passed, could sense the wounded fabric of existence crying out for healing. "I can't stop them," Marcus said, understanding flooding through him. "But I can show them something they've never seen before." He reached out with his new hybrid consciousness, touching the mind of the nearest devourer. The contact was like grasping liquid nitrogen, painful and shocking, but he held on. Into that alien awareness, Marcus poured every beautiful contradiction of human existence. The way people could hate war but love their enemies. The way they could find joy in sorrow, hope in despair, meaning in chaos. He showed the devourer a homeless man sharing his last sandwich with a stranger, a soldier laying down weapons to plant flowers in a battlefield, a child laughing while crying at a funeral. The devourer's consumption stopped. For the first time, in eons, it experienced something it had never imagined. The beauty of imperfection, the strength found in weakness, the light that shone brightest in darkness. One by one, Marcus touched each devourer's consciousness, sharing the impossible gift of human paradox. They began to understand that existence wasn't wrong. It was wonderfully, beautifully, chaotically right precisely because it was imperfect. The tears in reality began to heal as the devourers stopped feeding. But more than that, they began to create. Where they had consumed, they now wove new patterns of existence, strange and wonderful realities that followed no known laws, but somehow worked perfectly. The battle was over, but Marcus realized he was no longer entirely present in any single reality. He existed in the spaces between, a bridge connecting infinite possibilities. "Is it done?" Zara asked, approaching the engine carefully. Marcus turned to her, and she gasped. His appearance shifted constantly now. Sometimes human, sometimes alien, sometimes pure energy, sometimes all three at once. But his eyes were still kind, still recognizably the man she had chosen. "It's done," he said. "But this is only the, beginning." Chapter 4. The New Alliance 3 months after the day of selection, as historians were already calling it. Earth was a very different place. The alien ships hadn't left. Instead, they had become part of the landscape. Floating cities where humans and the Dominion of Light worked together on projects that would have been impossible for either species alone. Marcus stood on the observation deck of New Geneva Station, watching as human children played with young aliens in the weightless recreational areas. The sight still amazed him, even with his expanded perception. The children had adapted to each other instantly, inventing games that required both human creativity and alien precision. "The integration protocols are ahead of schedule," Zara reported, materializing beside him in that way she had of appearing exactly where she was needed. Over the months, she had become his primary liaison with both worlds, the only person who could fully interact with his transformed state. Marcus nodded, his form stabilizing into something mostly human for her benefit. It was a courtesy he extended to those who still needed to see him as the man he had been. "The adults are taking longer to adjust than the kids." "That is to be expected," Zara replied. "Adult minds are more rigid, more resistant to paradigm shifts. But they are learning." Through the station's transparent walls they could see Earth below, but it was no longer the Earth that Marcus had grown up on. The devourer's partial consumption had left scars in reality, places where physics worked differently, where time flowed in loops, where thoughts could become temporarily solid. Rather than trying to repair these anomalies, Humans and aliens had learned to work with them. The chaos zones had become centers of incredible innovation. Artists created sculptures from crystallized time. Scientists studied physics in areas where the laws changed hourly. Philosophers debated existence in regions where abstract concepts took physical form. The Council wants to know about the expansion project, Zara said, pulling up a holographic display that showed star charts Marcus hadn't seen before. Which expansion project? Marcus asked, though he already knew. His consciousness existed across multiple realities now, and he could see the plans taking shape in dimensions most beings couldn't perceive. The one where we take this alliance beyond Earth and the Dominion. The reports from the Deep Space Scouts are intriguing. The hologram showed distant galaxies where other species were just beginning to encounter their own versions of the Devourers. Some were fighting hopeless battles. Others had already fallen to despair. A few had found unique solutions, but none had achieved what Earth and the Dominion had accomplished. They need what we've learned, Marcus said. The balance between order and chaos, the strength that comes from embracing contradiction. Zara nodded. But such an undertaking would require permanent ambassadors, beings who could exist in multiple realities simultaneously, who could serve as bridges between incompatible forms of consciousness. Marcus smiled, and for a moment he looked exactly like the software engineer who had been chosen from a baseball stadium. Are you asking if I'm interested in a new job? I am asking if you believe there are others like you, humans who could undergo the transformation willingly, knowing the cost. Marcus's perception expanded, touching the minds of 7 billion humans across the planet. In the chaos zones, he sensed individuals whose thoughts already danced on the edge of multiple realities. Artists who painted impossible colors, mathematicians who dreamed in paradoxes, children who played games with rules that changed every moment. Yes, he said. There are others, not many, but enough. And you would be willing to guide them through the transformation? Marcus considered the question, feeling the weight of infinite possibilities pressing against his consciousness. He thought of Sarah, still working in her office but now collaborating with alien engineers on projects that redefined what technology could do. He thought of his parents, proud and confused and slightly terrified of what their son had become. He thought of humanity itself, chaos incarnate, spreading its beautiful contradictions across the galaxy. I'll guide them, he said. But only those who choose it freely, only those who understand what they're accepting. Zara smiled, her skin shifting to the warm gold color that meant deep satisfaction. Then we begin the Great Alliance Project. Next month, representatives from 12 species have already expressed interest. As if summoned by their conversation, alerts began chiming throughout the station. New ships were appearing at the edge of the solar system, not the smooth organic vessels of the Dominion, but angular, crystalline structures that sang with harmonic frequencies. The melodic collective, Zara identified, reading the energy, signatures. They communicate entirely through sound and rhythm. Their reality operates on principles of resonance and vibration. Marcus extended his perception toward the newcomers, feeling their confusion and hope in equal measure. They had heard rumors of a place where the Devourers had been not just stopped, but transformed. They had come seeking salvation for their own worlds. They'll need a different kind of chaos, Marcus realized. Something that matches their harmonic nature. Jazz, Zara said suddenly. Marcus looked at her in surprise. Jazz? Human musical form characterized by improvisation, syncopation, and complex harmonies. It is ordered chaos in audio form, exactly what they would understand. Marcus laughed, a sound that echoed across several dimensions simultaneously. You want me to teach aliens about jazz to save their civilization? I want you to show them that chaos and order can dance together in harmony, that the most beautiful music comes from the tension between structure and freedom. As the melodic collective's ships drew closer, Marcus felt the familiar thrill of possibility. Each new species they encountered would require a different approach, a different flavor of controlled chaos. The universe was vast and full of civilizations that needed to learn the lesson he had discovered in that stadium 3 months ago. Sometimes the greatest strength came from the places you thought were weaknesses. Sometimes salvation wore the face of madness. And sometimes the best way to save everyone was to let a little chaos into the perfectly ordered systems of existence. "Set up a meeting," Marcus said, his form beginning to shift as he prepared to. "Greet beings who thought in symphonies. Let's teach them how to improvise." Epilogue: The Infinite Dance. 5 years after the first selection, the galaxy was unrecognizable. The Great Alliance now spanned 47 species across 12 galaxies. Each had contributed their own unique form of controlled chaos to the collective defense against the Devourers, who had evolved from consumers of existence into gardeners of new realities. Marcus floated in the center of the Alliance Council chamber, his form now a constantly shifting amalgamation of every species he had helped transform. He was simultaneously human, alien, energy, and matter, a living symbol of the unity that had saved countless worlds. Around him, representatives from dozens of civilizations debated the next phase of expansion. The melodic collective sang policy, proposals in harmonic structures that made colors visible. The crystal minds projected their thoughts as geometric patterns in the air. The time dancers moved through past and future tenses of the same argument simultaneously, and through it all, the humans, now numbering in the thousands across the Alliance, served as the chaos catalysts that kept everything moving forward. They were teachers, diplomats, artists, and bridge builders, spreading their beautiful contradictions to any species willing to learn. Zara, now Supreme Coordinator of the Alliance, approached Marcus with news from the deep space exploration teams. "The Far Edge Scouts have detected something unprecedented," she said. "A galaxy where reality itself appears to be dreaming." Marcus extended his consciousness toward the distant signal, feeling something vast and slumbering at the edge of known space. "Dreaming reality," he mused. "That's a new one. What kind of chaos do you think dream logic requires?" "Children's games," Zara replied without hesitation. "The kind where rules exist only until someone imagines better ones." Marcus smiled, feeling the eternal dance of possibility spin around him. The universe was infinite, full of wonders and terrors and contradictions waiting to be discovered. Each new challenge would require new forms of chaos, new bridges between order and freedom. Somewhere on Earth, a child was playing a game where gravity worked sideways and colors had flavors. Somewhere in the Andromeda Galaxy, a species of living, mathematics was learning to compose poetry. Somewhere in the spaces between realities, the Devourers were weaving new forms of existence from the dreams of impossible creatures. And at the center of it all, the Alliance continued its work. Not conquering or controlling, but connecting, building bridges across the infinite diversity of existence, proving again and again that the universe was vast enough for every beautiful contradiction to find its place. Marcus looked out at the assembled representatives, each one a former enemy, or stranger who had become family through the shared experience of embracing paradox. The software engineer from New York was gone, but something better had taken his place. A living reminder that sometimes the most important changes began with a single choice to accept chaos. The Great Alliance had work to do. Realities to save, species to unite, impossible dreams to make possible. And at the heart of it all was the lesson learned in a baseball stadium on a summer day when the sky filled with impossible ships. Sometimes the best way to save the universe was to let it be beautifully, chaotically, perfectly imperfect. The dance continued, it always would. End of story.